Good morning, Title I coordinators. Thank you for joining us for the April webinar. I'm Erin Suddeth, and I'm the branch manager of the Title I Part A Support and Improvement branch. And I am trying to get our slides pulled up here. All right, so as always, if you have questions or comments that you'd like to share during the webinar, those of you joining us on Teams, you can just put those in the chat, or if you want to use the raise hand feature and then come off mute, you can share that. And you can just send those to me via email at erin.suddeth@education.ky.gov. And we are recording this and we'll post it to our webpage later today or tomorrow. And I think we've already taken care of everybody having their cameras off and being muted so everyone can focus on the presentation. The recording of last month's webinar is up on our Documents and Resources webpage, and the focus of that webinar was on the supplement, not supplant requirements. As I mentioned last month, those rules changed for Title I when we switched over from No Child Left Behind to ESSA back in 2015, and they can seem very confusing. So we reviewed all the requirements. I shared a couple new KDE resources related to those requirements, and then we did a little knowledge check at the end. So if you weren't able to join us, I definitely recommend going and watching that recording. Today, I have a reminder about our virtual statewide federal programs training, all of our usual reminders and updates, and then our focus is going to be on evaluating the content and effectiveness of the district parent and family engagement policy. So some very timely information for you. So our statewide federal programs training, this is going to be a virtual training provided by the Brewman Group. And as you probably know, if you've been with us for a while, they are a legal firm nationally recognized for federal grants management and education regulatory and legislative practices. So this training is no cost to districts. It is tentatively scheduled for June 17th and 18th. You're only going to need to pick one of those days. It's the same content over both days. And it does benefit district staff who are responsible for oversight and administration of federal education programs and compliance with legal requirements. And I think somebody has joined who needs to mute themselves. All right, thanks. So we do strongly encourage that the district superintendent, finance officer, and federal programs coordinator attend. And we will have registration information coming soon. I'll be sure to send that out to everyone directly. All right, we always like to check in as far as progress for monitoring the spend down of current year funds. So this is just to help make sure that you are on track to have at least 85% of 310L funds obligated by September 30th. So this is just breaking that out evenly across the 15-month period. So at the end of April, you should be at about 56, 57%. If you're significantly below that, make sure you check in with your finance officer to see if you're going to be on track to meet the carryover requirement or if you're maybe going to need to request a waiver. Remember, you can use Project 310L funds to pay for allowable and approved expenditures going back to July 1st of 2024. Now, if you have spent or obligated more than what's on this table, that is fine. You just want to make sure that you have taken action if you're significantly below this percentage. So if you are, you want to maybe increase how you monitor spend down of funds, have more conversations with your finance officer, with your principals, things like that. And while you're talking to your finance officer, go ahead and make sure that you're on track to meet the deadlines for all of the open projects. The next deadline is going to be for those 310J funds back from school year 22-23. So we did get an extension on that award period. We got extended through June 30th. So all of your funds need to be spent or encumbered by June 30th. And then the final federal cash request needs to be submitted by August 30th. So make sure that you've taken care of that. And then we still have a little bit more time on the others, but you do want to make sure you're monitoring all of the open projects throughout the year. As a reminder, we have submitted a waiver to USED regarding extending the availability of our 310K funds, as well as a waiver of that 3-year limitation for the carryover of 310L funds. And we are waiting to hear back from USED on that. So once we have more information, we'll be sure to share that out with you right away. As for now, please continue operating as though there are no exceptions or waivers or anything, and we'll let you know what we hear. Our April newsletter's up on our webpage. We had an article about streamlining your documentation in general, and then within that article, we had some information, some reminders about personally identifiable information, or PII. Be sure that you share that article with your Title I school staff. When districts provide evidence for KDE in relation to monitoring, we stress over and over the importance of not including any PII in that documentation. When PII is uploaded, we have to contact the district or school and ask them to remove that documentation from SharePoint, redact all the PII, and then resubmit it for our record retention purposes. And that's just a lot of unnecessary steps that you don't want to have to take. So that article talks about what PII is, and it reminds you that when we're talking about demonstrating program compliance, we really don't need to see anything at that level of detail that has like student names and student information in it. Of course, we have an announcement about those new supplement, not supplant resources I mentioned. Our principal's perspective articles about building capacity for parent involvement, that kind of relates to today's webinar. We had some of our usual announcements. We also had an announcement about schools and districts being encouraged to submit best practices. So if you think you've got some best practices you want to share, you can check that out and find the link to submit those. And for our suggested tasks for April, up first, we've got conducting stakeholder consultations on the development of the district and school Title I plans. And when I say Title I plan, I'm talking about our CDIP and our CSIP. So you want to make sure you're involving stakeholders such as parents and families, your participating private school officials, programs such as homeless, migrant education, English learners, your school leadership teams, community members, etc. You also want to conduct annual evaluation of district parent and family engagement policy, so more on that in just a minute. Evaluate services with neglected and delinquent facilities if that is applicable to you. Consult with your homeless liaison to determine the number of homeless students that you've had throughout the year, and start thinking about the amount to reserve for the 25-26 school year. And consult with eligible private schools and obtain affirmation of consultation with them if they decide they want to participate for school year 25-26. All right, so the main topic for today. First, let's talk about parent and family feedback. So the importance of getting stakeholder feedback in general, that is something that we see throughout Title I Part A in ESSA. And parent feedback should be gathered throughout the year. There are a variety of ways to do that. Some are kind of formal, some are a little more informal, and some of the more common ones are here on the slide. So up first, we have surveys. These are a very popular and a little more formal method of gathering feedback. A lot of people use online surveys, and that makes it easier to analyze the results. You can do it much more quickly with an online survey. So schools could create a very brief survey to share at their different Title I events, maybe just a couple questions asking, what did you like about the event? What didn't you like? Would you attend a similar event in the future? Those couple of questions can provide a lot of valuable insight when it comes to planning your program for the next school year. A parent-teacher conference might be a good time to get some feedback on the program in general, the parent and family engagement policy, and the school family compact. And I think I've shared this before, but it's a really good example. A school I visited last year during monitoring, they shared a story with me about some just very on-the-spot feedback that a parent provided as they were discussing the compact during the parent-teacher conference. The teacher made a note of that feedback, they shared it with their school leadership, and then that resulted in a revision to the compact for the next school year. So that's just a really convenient time for you to be able to do that. And of course, parents can also provide feedback through emails and phone calls, even informal conversations at non-Title I events or out in the community. Anything that you hear from parents, you can just make a note of that. We also want to think about if there's any other data points that maybe you're not using, you haven't considered using, that could provide you with some feedback. So what about the information that you provide to parents via websites, social media, online newsletters, things like that. Are there any built-in analytics that would provide some insight into maybe how often those things are being used? For example, so the platform that we use for the Title I newsletter, it sends me a report with some general and anonymous information such as the percentage of recipients that opened the email, the number of unique clicks for the different links that were in that particular newsletter, etc. I can also track things about the webinars. I can find out how many of you are watching on Teams, how many of you are watching on the media portal, and then I can see how many times the recordings were watched on YouTube. So all of that is stuff that I look at and I look at with everyone else who works with Title I, and we can kind of triangulate that data combined with monitoring findings, webinar feedback survey, all of those things, and that helps us determine what we can provide to support you. So districts and schools can do the same thing to develop a parent and family engagement needs assessment, and then that's going to better inform your parent engagement program. So today I'm going to focus on how to get parent feedback that can help you evaluate the effectiveness of the district policy. So this comes from ESSA 1116A2. So the district parent and family engagement policy has to describe how the district is going to conduct this annual evaluation of the content and effectiveness of the policy in approving the academic quality of all of the Title I schools. And there's a couple of things that this evaluation is going to identify. First is barriers to greater participation by parents in Title I activities. And it does highlight giving particular attention to some specific groups of parents, economically disadvantaged, disabled, limited English proficiency, etc. We also want to identify the needs of parents and family members to assist with the learning of their children. That can include engaging with school personnel and teachers. And then finally, strategies to support successful school and family interactions. And I have italicized the phrase describe how in that first bullet point as another reminder that it is not enough for your policy to say that you will do this. You actually have to explain how it's going to be done in your policy. And on that note, although this information is included in the district policy, we know that the majority, if not all, of the parent and family engagement events typically occur at the school level. So I think it would make perfect sense for this process to include some responsibilities for the schools. Some of our districts prefer to create one kind of unified survey, maybe has a drop-down list of all of the schools. That way it's just got a more consistent look, consistent questions, and then they can get all of those results and filter those out by the individual school or the individual response. Whether you're using a survey or you're having a face-to-face conversation, it's important to make sure that you're asking meaningful questions. So if you're only asking yes or no questions, then your results are going to lack detail. Providing parents with options to choose from, as well as maybe some open-ended questions, that's going to help you get the level of detail that is needed to make more informed decisions. So what we're going to do in today's webinar is break down each of these three pieces that ESSA says the evaluation must identify. What exactly should you be looking for? And what are some examples of questions or kind of prompts and conversation starters that could help you get this information? I am in the process of developing a more robust resource that is going to have some sample questions and prompts and things that you could choose to use with parents, but I am not finished with that yet. So that is something that is coming. All right, up first, we want to identify barriers to participation in Title I activities. So first, review the attendance and participation data from the Title I family events. Are there any events that were better attended than others? When we're reviewing evidence or conducting interviews for monitoring, we see a wide variety of parent and family engagement events and activities. And unfortunately, sometimes an event is not well attended. And that can be very disheartening for the school or the district, especially when they've planned really great activities and they have useful information to share. Now, sometimes it's not that families didn't want to attend the event, it's that they couldn't, oftentimes due to situations that were beyond their control. So identifying and addressing barriers to participation is going to be the first step to getting the parents and the families to the table. So we want to consider factors that may have impacted attendance and whether or not there's something that the school or the district could do to mitigate these factors. And the factors probably vary from school to school or certainly from district to district. So a few things to think about: work schedules. The work schedules of the majority of your parent population is going to impact their ability to participate. So if we have a lot of parents with 9 to 5 jobs, they probably can't make it to an event that starts at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. If we have a lot of parents who maybe work second shift, they're not going to be available at 6:30 or 7 o'clock. Now, the odds of finding a time slot that works for everyone are slim to none, but understanding what works for the majority of the families is a start. You can and should also host events at different times to be more accommodating to people's schedules and availability. For schools with a large population of families whose primary language is not English, some additional steps may be needed um, to ensure that those families can participate in your events and activities. So, advertising the event in multiple languages, making sure they know that there's going to be an interpreter at the event, both of those would be very helpful. Beyond that, the district and school could help families make connections to maybe some adult education opportunities that would support them in learning English if that's something that they're interested in. We also have a growing population of grandparents and other relatives who are raising children across the state. And it's important to remember that someone who hasn't had a school age child for 20 or 30 plus years, they may have a very different mindset or understanding about the school family relationship. And they may need some additional information about that. And the same can be said for maybe aunts or uncles or other relatives who may not be familiar with processes because maybe they don't have their own children. So this is all brand new to them. These groups may also benefit from some more target activities and supports to provide them with support for their specific situation. Lack of reliable transportation can be a huge barrier for people. So we want to think about things like, is there some sort of shuttle that could be set up and provided to get people to the building, or some sort of coordination with existing public transportation services if that's available in your area? We can also think about partnering with maybe a more centrally located church or business or community center that families could walk to. Just because it's a school event doesn't mean it has to happen at the school. So you could make those connections there. And making childcare available at events is another way to make it easier for parents to participate. And don't forget that Title I Parent and Family Engagement funds can be used to provide things like transportation and childcare. So when we think about identifying barriers to participation, these are some sample questions and prompts that we might want to think about. So up first, which of the following events did you attend during the 24-25 school year? So obviously this one's meant to be asked at the end of the school year, and you could maybe provide a list of all of the Title I events that were held that year, maybe some corresponding check boxes, and they can just select all that apply. Now, they may not remember all of the events or the specific name of them, so you might want to include, the date or the month that the event occurred to kind of help jog their memories. Were there any events this year that you wanted to attend but you were unable to do so? And if so, what was the reason that you couldn't attend? So again, might be useful to have some check boxes there for things like it was an inconvenient date or time, didn't have childcare or transportation, maybe something to do with disability access, um, inadequate notification of the event or poor communication. If they just learned about the event 48 hours before it happened, there's a good chance that they weren't able to attend. Lack of interpreter, or maybe the focus and topic of that event was not of interest to them. And then finally, kind of an open-ended question, how could the district or school make it easier for you to participate in family events? So for that, you might want to have some check boxes of some of those common barriers, as well as an other field where they can just submit additional items. Next, we need to identify the needs of parents to assist with learning. First up, we want to make sure that we're meeting parents and family members where they are. So what do they already know? Avoid providing things that they don't want or need. And consider whether or not new information and supports can be incorporated into existing practices. So, identifying what parents already know is going to help you better pinpoint what they need. And continuing to use program money for items or services that parents don't want or need is not really a good use of funds. So, we don't want to just keep doing the same thing, especially if people are not showing up. You also want to make sure you are thinking about how parent needs can change over time, as well as between grade levels. So we want to make sure that everything stays relevant to them. And a reminder that not everything has to be a school wide event. There's no rule saying that every parent and family engagement event has to be for the entire school. So you want to determine what works best for the individual district and school. Some may benefit from a mixture of school wide events and then some more grade level or grade range specific events, or maybe a school-wide event that has some differentiated activities for the different grade ranges. We want to make sure that whatever information we're providing the parents, it's actually going to help them support their child. And I think this is especially important to keep in mind for like our K-8 and our K-12 schools. Make sure that there are supports being provided for parents of students at all grade levels, but don't forget that the needs of a parent with a kindergarten student are going to be very different from the needs of a parent with a middle school student or a high school student. Some sample questions that we could ask. First up, I feel confident helping my child in the following areas. This is one that I saw on a school survey this year during monitoring, and I thought it was a really good idea. So they asked this question and they had some check boxes, and the parents could choose from subjects that they feel confident about, or on the other side, you could say, I don't feel confident helping my child, and have them identify those. So, math, reading, literacy, writing, social studies, study habits, all of those things. I would be most interested in attending events focused on the following. Again, saw this on a survey this year. So when we're asking about event topics, you could maybe include some of those same subjects that I just mentioned a minute ago, but you could also consider expanding that list to include some of the other things that we know we can support families with. So maybe they want an event about some healthy lifestyle tips, food, fitness, emotional well-being. Maybe they want something about internet safety or preventing substance abuse. College and career readiness, there's a lot of options. I think Title I Parent and Family Engagement Funds should support the following. This would definitely be one that you would want to make sure you provide examples of the types of things that funds could be used for. So resources, tools I can use with my child at home, light snacks for events, etc. Providing those options to choose from is going to help you avoid parents submitting spending suggestions that we just know are not allowable. And then an open-ended question of what additional feedback do you have about how the district or school can help build your capacity to engage with your child's education? And the last thing that the evaluation needs to identify are strategies to support successful school and family interactions. So, our overall goal for the Parent and Family Engagement Program is schools and families working together as partners to help students succeed. We need to consider how past experiences may shape someone's impression of the school or district. We know that our opinions about the relationship between home and school are shaped by past experiences. This could be from when we were in school, or maybe more recent experiences, either as a parent or as an educator. And for some of us, the majority of those experiences were positive. But unfortunately, some people may have struggled in school or had some negative experiences that they're kind of bringing to the table. We also need to think about someone from another country who maybe is unfamiliar with the American school system. They may have a completely different understanding of what that school home relationship looks like. Similarly, as I mentioned before, like if we have grandparents raising children, it could be a very different landscape than when they raised their children. We want to establish expectations for successful interactions. The support of resources like the Parent and Family Engagement Policy and Compact can really help do that and help get everybody on the same page. We need to make sure parents feel comfortable communicating with school staff and emphasize that meaningful collaboration, meaningful two-way communication, not just telling them information, but actually having conversations with them. Make a point to share good news with parents. They don't want to only hear from the district or the school when something bad has happened. And then help parents see where and how they can participate. So, some sample questions for identifying strategies to support successful interactions. First up, does your family feel comfortable participating in events at the school? And do you feel comfortable communicating with your child's principal, teacher, counselor, etc.? And if not, what could we do to make you feel more comfortable? So, if parents don't feel comfortable coming to the school for events or communicating with school staff, we want to be sure we're trying to figure out why. You maybe could consider providing some contact information with that question in case the parent wants to reach out to discuss further. Um, what time of day is most convenient for you to attend events and conferences, things like that? What's your preferred method of communication? Um, that'll help you plan events that can increase the likelihood that they're going to be able to show up. How would you like to see school events advertised? So find out where parents like to get their information and be sure to communicate event announcements through a variety of means to increase awareness. We always like to remind you that not all parents use social media. So relying solely on those social media platforms to communicate events means that there is a segment of the population that is not going to know what's going on. And for those of us who do use social media, we know that just because we've liked or we've followed a page or a group or whatever, that doesn't mean that that algorithm is always going to put that information in our feed. We could be a big fan of theirs, but for some reason not see their information from time to time. So make sure you're communicating that through a variety of means. Then are you interested in becoming more involved with the school? So we know that parents can volunteer to help out in the lunchroom or they can help run copies in the front office and things like that. But what about more in-depth partnerships with parents who, hang on, more in-depth partnerships with parents that highlight their strengths. Some examples that we've seen this year during monitoring of parent partnerships, one school had a reading buddy program and parent volunteers came and did one-on-one reading with students who were struggling with reading. There was another where they had a parent who had training as a yoga instructor, and that parent came to one of their parent family engagement events that focused on, emotional wellness and just healthy lifestyle in general. And that person was able to share some of their yoga techniques at that family event. So next steps after you've, done your surveys or had your meetings or whatever and gotten this feedback, the work does not end there. Really, that's when the work begins. We need to review and analyze the results. We want to look for patterns and brainstorm possible solutions. So make sure that you are doing this with some other stakeholders. So involve other faculty, leadership teams, your SBDM councils. And don't forget to document that you're doing this. That helps demonstrate compliance. Um, you probably save your survey questions and the spreadsheet with all of the responses, but what about the minutes from the meeting where these results were discussed and we determined what the next steps would be? What about communication with the parents and families to let them know, hey, here's a summary of the results we got from you, and here's what we're going to do with those results so that they know that their feedback is being valued and actually used. We want to use the findings to design evidence-based strategies for more effective parental involvement and revise the parent and family engagement policy, and that is straight from ESSA 1116A2E. So how does the feedback that we got from parents inform changes about the Title I policy, the compact, the general parent and family engagement program in the district as well as in the participating schools? We should be able to see a clear connection between the evaluation results, the analysis that was done by the district and the schools, and then the subsequent changes that were made to the document or the program or whatever. All right, so that wraps up our topic for today. So does anyone have any questions? Got the chat open. I don't see any there, but let me also look in email. All right, I don't see any yet. Of course, if you think of some after the fact, or if you share this recording out with the schools and they have any questions, they can send those to me or the district's assigned Title I consultant. Okay, and our next webinar is going to be Thursday, May 29th at 10 a.m. as always. And we have a link to our webinar feedback survey there, and that just helps us know what you want to see more of. So comments, ideas, suggestions, anything like that can be submitted through that anonymous feedback survey. And that link is also in all of our newsletters. We didn't have any new requested topics after last month's webinar, but I do always check that pretty regularly. All right. I do not see any questions that have come in. So thank you all for joining, and we will see you next month. Have a great end of your school year.